What Imagineering secrets can be found at Rock and Roller Coaster starring the Muppets and the updated Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run attractions? Stay tuned for some fun details about these new experiences. Welcome aboard Imagination Skyway, your guided tour through the worlds of Disney and Imagineering. I'm your host, Matthew Kroll, and it's my job to explore the stories and places we love and the people who bring them to life. In today's episode, we discuss two major attraction refurbishments that opened this month at Disney's Hollywood Studios in Walt Disney World. Rock and Roller Coaster starring the Muppets and Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run featuring the Mandalorian and Grogu. While each attraction opened on May 26th, 2026, my special guest and I both had the chance to preview these attractions ahead of their opening day and to speak with the Imagineers who developed these updates thanks to an invitation from Disney Parks. In this episode, we'll discuss everything we learned from Walt Disney Imagineering and from our own observations about these new experiences, including some Imagineering details you will not want to miss. After our conversation, make sure to keep the podcast rolling because I am including my interviews with not one, not two, but four Walt Disney Imagineers who worked on these attraction updates. As you fasten your seatbelt, I encourage you to take out your mobile devices and search for Imagination Skyway on your favorite social media app. And if you're looking for ad-free episodes and bonus content, which I have a lot right now, become an Imagination Skyway pass holder at patreon.com/Imagination Skyway. And if this episode leaves you longing for that next trip to Disney or any other destination, reach out to our partners and sponsors at KMV Travel, voted the top travel agency in Orlando in 2025. To get started, visit kmvtravel.com/Skyway. As we begin our journey, please remain seated, keep your hands and arms inside the podcast at all times, and enjoy your journey aboard Imagination Skyway. This week was a really big week at Walt Disney World because we had so many attraction openings. There were 7 major experiences that opened up this past week, specifically on May 26th to kick off Cool Kids Summer. And 2 of those experiences have existed, but are updated and refreshed with these new versions of attractions. And we're going to dive specifically into the Imagineering details and some more Easter eggs and things you should look out for with these 2, which are Rock and Roller Coaster starring the Muppets and Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run featuring the Mandalorian and Grogu. And to chat with me about the subject, I brought back onto the show James from Guide to WDW. James, welcome back to the show. So good to have you here.
Matt, so happy to be here. This was like one of the biggest weeks that I can remember at Walt Disney World. So many different things happening at the same time. And 2 of my personal favorite rides being updated and upgraded in really major ways, in really fun and unexpected ways. So I'm really excited to dive into the Imagineering here.
Yeah, I was so glad that this was the first opportunity we had to also meet in person. So it was awesome to get to sit down and chat and to cross paths and geek out about things as we were all getting content on our phones, just like, having expressions to each other like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Yes. It was just a lot of fun. And these, so you said, these are 2 of your favorite attractions. So I'll have to ask, even before we get to the newer versions, when you heard the news about these updates, I think perhaps the softer blow was for Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run because it's still pretty much the same attraction, just with an updated storyline. Mm-hmm. Rock and Roller Coaster, similar story. It's still the same ride. It's still got the same blueprint and layout as the Rock and Roller Coaster starring Aerosmith version. But how did you take the news when you first heard about these changes?
Your instinct is exactly right, because when they announced the updates to Millennium Falcon is always a ride that I really, really love. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, huge Star Wars nerd, and I think I love it more than a lot of people. It's always one I love, just jumping in the single rider. I even like Engineer, the old Engineer experience. I just like pressing the buttons. They're fun buttons to press. But when they said okay, it's a new storyline, and then once they revealed the destinations, I was like, okay, everything sounds great. I'm so on board for this. Muppets was a more complicated story, just with mainly with the loss of Muppet Vision 3D. That is a attraction that is near and dear to my heart, a personal favorite, one that I have very fond memories growing up, watching with my parents, and then taking my kids to see it. They saw it right before it closed for the very first time. you might be able to hear my kids in the background running around. But so
We're both dads. We've got kids in the back. Emily, I think, has screamed in the back of my podcast episodes before.
Yeah, we're used to the screaming and the running and the footsteps and all that. So when they announced the Rock and Roller Coaster starring the Muppets, it was kind of a unexpected like curveball. Like I know there was a niche fan kind of theory of like, oh, they should put Muppets here, but most people were saying like, oh, it should be this band or that band. They should update it to Queen or Taylor Swift or something like that. So when they announced the Muppets, I was like, okay, I'm intrigued. I'm optimistic, but kind of like cautiously so. Because kind of going into this, I was just kind of like, well, now this is the Muppet ride at Walt Disney World. And how is that going to feel losing Muppet Vision, now having this thing that is arguably the most intense ride at Disney World? The one of the highest height requirements, now that's the Muppet ride. And so that was kind of my feelings going into it of just like, I was unsure about just like my feelings about it. It was just like lots of mixed feelings of just like I was excited that the Muppets were coming back like almost immediately. It was only about a year gap when they weren't there, but also like, you know, it was something where it's just like, okay, I'm interested, and I'm interested to see how I feel once I actually get to experience it.
Yeah, for me, it was a lot like the comparison would be not many fans lamented the transformation from Star Tours to Star Tours The Adventure Continues. Same universe, same storyline, just updated with more options and with exciting updates and lots of added rewritability to Star Tours, and now, of course, to Millennium Falcon Smuggler's run as well, where the Rock and Roller Coaster transformation, not to be, I think the closest analogy was moving from Maelstrom to Frozen Ever After, because you've got the same exact ride, but now you have a new storyline, a new universe, new characters, not quite the same experience as it was before. Yes, it's got the same drop, it's got the same backwards portion, all that with Rock and Roller Coaster, same exact. You know, people looked at a few of my videos and said, oh, the ride looks slower. And I said, no, it's literally the exact same ride. Yeah. It's still 0 to 57 in 2.8 seconds. Like, you sit in that car and you know it's not any slower. It's got the same inversions. Like, the track is unchanged. And think about the timeline that from when they closed Rock and Roller Coaster starring Aerosmith to opening Rock and Roller Coaster starring the Muppets. There's just no time to gut and create a new track and a new layout.
Absolutely.
It was clearly the same exact ride, but it was this real total flip of the characters that are in there. You know, for me though, and you can tell me if you feel the same way, the vibe of the attraction is kind of the same to me. You know, it's just got, for me, it's got more than it did before. Like, you've still got the same premise backstage. You're going to see a band perform at G-Force Records instead of Aerosmith. It's Dr. Teeth and Electric Mayhem. You still have them late to this concert that they should have been at already. You still are given those backstage passes. You're still boarding a limo, or a limo in this case.
A limo, yes.
Thank you, Dr. Bunsen Honeydew. You know, you still have that alleyway. You still board the attraction. And you still got that iconic countdown to the launch. You've got music blasting in your ears as you're riding the attraction. You know, it still has the same vibe. It's just a little zanier and a lot more Muppets.
Yes.
And I compared it as like this Venn diagram is how I described it to people, where you have these three circles of Legacy Rock and Roller Coaster, Muppet Vision 3D, and Dr. Teeth and Electric Mayhem, and you sort of put them in this central point between those three circles is Rock and Roller Coaster starring the Muppets. And, you know, I felt when I was just experiencing this, and especially walking through it, felt like I was back at Beacon Barrel at when it first launched, and we got that incredible preview of Beacon Barrel, because I was like, people should be glad that I wasn't there opening day, because I would have been that annoying guest. Like, excuse me, can I look at this little detail over here? Can I, like, I was just scouring everything, because there's just so much detail that's like completely spread throughout every single square inch of this space.
Yes, I 100% agree. I think that Venn diagram is a great analogy. And I talked to David Brescia, the Imagineer, who is the story lead and writer on Muppet Rock and Roller Coaster, and he compared it to, they were thinking of similar to Muppet Christmas Carol or Muppet Treasure Island, where it's like, okay, we have the Muppets and they're doing Rock and Roller Coaster. Like Rock and Roller Coaster is now this like classic theme park story, and now you have the Muppets playing those roles, and it's like that's something where it's like, oh, this everything clicked in for it to me, where it's still Rock and Roller Coaster. It isn't just Rock and Roller Coaster with a Muppet paint job. Just making like the guitar outside look more, psychedelic. It is, okay, you have all of these Muppet characters that people love taking on these roles of the band and the manager and all these different things. And going through the queue, it is clear Imagineering understood the assignment. They understood what people love about Muppet Vision, what makes the Muppets work. And like, I made a joke video where I was like, oh, here are the top 300 Easter eggs in Muppet Rock and Roller Coaster. I might call it Muppet Vision just because I haven't slept much.
Force a habit. Yeah.
Yeah. But I was like, top 300 Easter eggs. And then Kermit said you have a minute and a half. And I was like, okay, top 8. But I was like, you might be able to make a 300 Easter egg list because everything is jam packed with so many details. All of the album artwork that they have on the walls is like custom and has different jokes. There are references to a tribute to all nations, but mostly America. Like there's Pizza Rizzo boxes and flyers. Like we had like an incredible privilege to be able to just like walk through this queue as much as we wanted to. And like, I was as excited to walk through the queue as I was to go on the ride. And I do really like the ride, but it was just like there's so much. The opening rotunda, kind of the lobby you go through, has a live stream, and there's over 30 minutes of content, and there are these little 30-second to minute-long bits where it's like they have celebrity cameos. There was one with like Weird Al and Fozzie kind of playing off of each other. There are these really funny bits that I think like people will start to quote and start to glom onto, similar to what they did with Muppet Vision. But it's a perfect thing of like, you'll go through it, you'll see probably like 1, 2, or 3 of those, and then the next time you go on, you'll see something else completely different. And so there's so much just in there and so much love that they put into every single corner of this queue and of this ride, that it is just like, okay, that Venn diagram that you described, that's exactly it.
Yeah, there are a lot of different directions I want to go with this. I think the only criticism I have of the new experience is that rotunda, because like you said, I didn't realize until I also spoke with an Imagineer, and I actually spoke with 4 throughout the day, and there's over the point that there's over 30 minutes of that footage. You're in that rotunda on a good day and I mean a good day meaning having a long time in there, like 2 to 3 minutes, and so you're gonna have to ride that at minimum 10 times to get to see every bit of it. I'm wondering if it's as simple.
Get lucky with the timing and the loop too.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I'm wondering if it's as simple as like, that long stretch outside where there's really not much to look at as you're going up the ramp to then go around the side of the building. If they just added like TVs in there, like similar to like
added some monitors, that would be smart to get people to see more of it. I also see like, you mentioned rewritability, and I think that is the key word for both of these rides that we're talking about today, where they have the 30 minutes in the queue that you'll probably see different parts of each time you go through. They have a different character makes an appearance in the pre-show, so it's like Fozzie could make an appearance, Sam Eagle, Miss Piggy. I'm sure I'm forgetting. It's something like 5 different characters.
I'm trying to remember all of them too.
Yeah, that shows up right on the monitor, right behind the Scooter animatronic, who is like one of the most amazing animatronics that I've ever seen, which we can talk about a lot.
Let's talk about it.
And then also there are the 5 different songs on the ride, and then after the ride, right before you exit the vehicle, there's Statler and Waldorf, and they have a lot of different lines of dialogue that they can say. So there's just, this ride is going to feel a bit different. You're going to get different gags each time you go on it.
Yeah, the pre-show was the one that surprised me. I didn't realize until, it might have been a third time I went through, because I think maybe the second time I watched it, I said, maybe I just didn't catch this the first time, because the first time I was filming it and I was trying to just, pay attention to every little detail in there. So the second time I'm like, oh, I forgot that maybe this character appeared here. But then the third time I'm like, wait a second. No, this is not exactly the same pre-show that I saw before. And that's interesting that it is different every time you experience it, or, you might not get the same pre-show twice. They really loaded it with we should, what I want to talk about here is Easter eggs and some of your favorite details, because whether it's the pre-show, the queue, the load area, even the gift shop, Rock Around the Shop, there are so many Easter eggs for Muppet Vision 3D.
Yeah.
Did you have any particular favorites of the 300 that you could have mentioned?
Of the 300, I really love because it is such a Muppet joke. There's one of the signs that you go by right before the corkscrew on the left-hand side. It looks like a yield sign. It says obligatory Easter egg, and it's the silhouette of Waldo, the spirit of 3D. And that's just like, okay, it's there for like half a second as you're going by it. I'm sure a lot of people might not even notice it the first couple times they go on this ride, but then once it clicks, it's like, oh, it's Waldo. They fit in a great Muppet Vision Easter egg into this, and it's just like there's only so many Easter eggs that they could put on the actual roller coaster itself, because it is only a minute and a half, and you are going really fast on it. So that I really love that. The keys under the mat. That one is, reference to the Muppet Vision queue, and then this time it's piano keys, and that one you can only find at the single rider line. So there are so many. They're literally David, the Imagineer I mentioned earlier, was saying like each time he would go back into the queue, he would notice new things, that the new props that people would put in. So there were even Easter eggs that he was noticing and finding new right as the ride was leading up to opening.
Yeah, there was so much in the queue, and to your point, there were so many deep cuts, and not only references to the show, but the pre-show of Muppet Vision 3D. And one, as soon as I passed it, I took a picture and I sent it to my wife, because it's such a silly inside joke or reference that she loves, which is the very beginning of the Muppet Vision 3D pre-show, where they have the basically maintenance crew that's putting the sign up, and it's got Chuck is the main, I guess, manager or foreman or supervisor for it. And there are two references to Chuck that I found in the attraction, and one of them, as you're walking in the non-single rider, the standby or lightning lane, because after that, it's after the pre-show, it's merged at that point, is as you're going past the turn point to go toward, you could angle a little bit to go towards the load area. There's a sign that says, "Another good job by Chuck's Uptown Construction Company, pedestrian detour, expected completion date TBD. On-site foreman Roy," who's another character that was in that part of the pre-show. And it says, "Safety first. If you see an unsafe condition, report it." And then there's another one that popped up in Rock Around the Shop that I need to find real quick in my camera roll. But it was literally another reference to, it was Chuck's foreman hat. That's right, Chuck's foreman hat. And below that are two boxes that say MV3D. So that's literally Muppet Vision 3D. And so I just thought that one was a lot of fun. And then as I was focusing so much on Chuck, I forgot the other one I was going to reference. But there's the pre-show. That's what it was. And so in the pre-show, there's a lot in the pre-show. I think you've even covered in your content the Pizza Rizzo pizza box that's there, and there's sort of like one of the penguins has a slice of pizza off to the side. But in the beginning of Muppet Vision 3D, the actual show, when Waldorf and Statler are having their banter about the 3D show, they say, "Hey, look, an orchestra of penguins. Yeah, probably took the job for the halibut." And there's literally in between them this in between the two penguins at the sound booth, there is an ice bucket filled with halibut. So it's great. These are such deep cuts. I guarantee 98% or more of the people who did Muppet Vision 3D, it would just go way over their heads, right? Between the Waldo obligatory Easter egg reference, the Chuck references, the halibut in between the two penguins. But to your point, Imagineering definitely understood the assignment, and I think they proved that they get it. They understand the reverence for Muppet Vision 3D. I don't think this is exactly what guests and fans were hoping for when they said they were going to find a way to keep Muppet Vision 3D alive. I think there's probably maybe something else in the works, but this is at least in some way to keep the spirit of Muppet Vision 3D alive with this new attraction. There's just so much.
That was one of my big takeaways where, the losing Muppet Vision definitely was hard and hurt personally. I took it very personally. No. But after going through this, one of the things that I've always said about Muppet Vision was like the pre-show is as good as the show. Or it's something where it's like you want to go and watch that whole pre-show loop. And I feel like this carries on that legacy and pushes it even further. There are so many more details, so many more references. There's so many things that they're drawing on, references to the Aerosmith version of the ride. There are cameos by Ileana Douglas, who played their manager, and Ken Marino, who had a non-speaking role before he was famous as like a sound engineer in Studio C with Aerosmith. And he gets a nice cameo in the live stream and at the concert. And there's a plaque on the wall to Lifetime Achievement Award to him, and it has like really nice message of just like, oh, see how far you've come, which is like, it's not talking about necessarily Ken Marino, but it's talking about Ken Marino. And it's one of those things that it's like, if you're a fan of Rock and Roller Coaster, there are those nods to it. There's the black Les Paul on the wall right behind Scooter. There's so much of that there. There's so much of Muppet Vision in there, and there's so much of just like the DNA of the Muppets itself that it gave me those feelings of Muppet Vision that I was really caught off guard of. Just like I was not expecting to get that much just in this queue and on this ride.
Yeah, there's even before the pre-show, there's all these posters on the wall of different, all the different Muppets characters. I know there were references to like the Muppets movie that are throughout the queue, throughout the ride. And there was a reference to the Miss Piggy, with her big solo number. I forgot. I wish I would have taken a picture, but there's a reference where Miss Piggy's like, excited for her big number in Muppet Vision 3D, and whatever her quote was. And that's just, of course, whenever I record, I always forget the direct quotes, so I need to write these down. But like whatever that quote is, it's actually quoted in a poster, very small at the bottom. And it's one of those things where having this chance to walk through and be that geek, going through and just like looking for all these Easter eggs, you find these little things here and there. Now, you mentioned the Scooter animatronic. And I think that this is another one of those details that most guests are not going to catch how brilliant it is because of how brilliant it is, right? It's just one of those things that it's so... It should be obvious. It almost makes you feel like you're looking at a real Muppet, and there's a reason that that's the case. And you do deep dives on the tech side, and you do so much deep research on it. And we even talked about this a little bit when we were chatting at Hollywood Studios. So I'd love if you could talk a little bit about the Scooter animatronic and how brilliant it is.
Yeah, the Scooter animatronic is great. And it is one of those things where you see how far things have come, because they do have the original Statler and Waldorf animatronics. Like they did some touch-up work on them to put them at the end of the ride. And then also the penguins, I believe those are the same figures that were in Muppet Vision. But you can see kind of how limited their motion is. Scooter looks just like a Muppet, like right in front of you being puppeteered. To the point where his arm, there's an arm rod pushing his arm up and down. So it looks like he's being puppeteered. And they actually mocapped the Muppet. And they have a great picture that at first I thought that was a joke, because it was just seems like this thing of a Muppet Labs, okay, this is how extreme the technology is, of Scooter with the ping pong balls and the black and white kind of patterns. But no, they actually mocapped the motion of Scooter to really capture how expressive these Muppets are. And one of the things that was just the coolest life highlight thing that we got to do was we got to see the Muppets up close in person perform live, and Scooter was there. And I have to say, beyond that just being a really cool thing to do, being able to be just a few feet away from Scooter as he's being puppeteered, it feels the same as he does in the pre-show. The effect is the same. It wasn't a thing of oh, here's an approximation. It feels very much like they've captured the essence of this character, and it's just kind of makes me go okay, I want them to go further with this. I want them to do more Muppet animatronics, because if you think about something like Frozen, where those animatronics are brilliant and so smooth, but there's a layer of translation there of going from computer 3D animation to physical animation in the real world, which they do a brilliant job with. But with a Muppet, it's one-to-one. Like it feels like they're actually there. So, this is my kind of pitch of like, I think Muppet Rock and Roller Coaster is so good. They should go further. They should do more with the Muppets, make that whole area a Muppet Studios section, bring back the idea of the Great Muppet Movie Ride that was kind of a concept before Jim Henson passed, of just like, I want to see a classic dark ride, kind of a, it's the Muppets doing a classic Disney dark ride, a similar way of the Muppets doing Rock and Roller Coaster.
Yeah, this is not necessarily an episode about predictions, but one of the things I've been predicting, especially as these little pieces have been coming together, is that once the Villains Land is open, Villains Unfairly Ever After will either go away or it will move to Magic Kingdom, because then it's not going to make sense, right, to have Villains Unfairly After in Hollywood Studios when you literally have a whole Villains Land. I mean, it makes a little bit of sense because you're not going to Magic Kingdom that trip, but that does leave room, to your point, and there's backstage roads back there, nothing they haven't dealt with before, right? Like there's nothing that they haven't been able to extend backstage and expand the backstage roads and move some services around and some service buildings around. So I foresee like that building next to Muppet Vision. Oh my gosh, we did the same thing you did, Muppet Rock and Roller Coaster. I don't think it's just going to be, I don't think Muppet Vision 3D is coming back, but some advanced update to a Muppet show of some kind, or Muppet experience. And to your point, they've proved, and yeah, it was great that for multiple reasons, we had the chance to see those Muppets up close, the real Muppets up close, because it does validate how realistic that animatronic is. So they've proved that they could do a show with animatronic Muppets and make it believable that those are like one-to-one the real Muppets. And that leaves a lot of possibility for that section of the park, which right now is a thrill heavy, except for the Beauty and the Beast show, is a pretty thrill heavy section. So that's one of those areas where, thinking of like rider swap, like my wife might go and ride Tower of Terror and Rock and Roller Coaster, and I take their girls over to Magic of Disney Animation, or the Baby Care Center over there, or the Disney Junior Mickey Mouse Clubhouse live show, or when Magic of Disney Animation opens. So there's a lot of potential in that courtyard for its expansion. And yeah, maybe it will be a future Muppet home.
I would love to see that. And I'm really rooting, like the reactions that I've seen have been overwhelmingly positive, and I'm really rooting that this is so much of a success that it just tells Disney, hey, keep going with the Muppets in the parks. There's so many different ways that they can utilize the Muppets in the parks, whether it's a thrill ride, whether it's a dark ride, whether it's a show. I think the more Muppets, the better. Yeah.
I want to make sure we spend a little bit of time at least talking about Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run, because then I also have a third thing I want to attach to this real quick. But final thoughts about Rock and Roller Coaster, anything that we missed? And I'll ask, have a favorite, I know the answer because we talked about it, but a favorite soundtrack of the 5 on the attraction?
I'll answer that question first, because that kind of leads into like the moment where it really clicked for me, which was riding and Love Roller Coaster came on. I went on it 4 times. I got 4 out of the 5 songs. There's not a bad one in the bunch. I got everything except for song 2. But Love Roller Coaster was the one where I found myself singing along. And the only other time that's happened is on Guardians, where I'm singing along to the songs when September comes on and stuff like that. So I was just like, oh, them being able to change up the soundtrack, have these different things. It feels more like a party. It feels fun. It feels very different getting Love Roller Coaster versus Def Leppard versus Born to Be Wild. So it actually, the Aerosmith medleys before, while I thought they both were good, or maybe I think there was 2 or 3 of them, but they were very similar. They kind of like bled into each other. It had kind of the same sound profile. Whereas this, you have a bit of classic rock, you have a bit of funk. The Walking on Sunshine is surprisingly great. And I think that, Rock and Roller Coaster was my first big roller coaster with an inversion. And it was something where I was terrified to do it. I didn't even know a coaster could launch like that. And so I have the picture of myself, I looked terrified, but after I went on it, I was hooked. Like it hooked me on big roller coasters. And I think I was, that was 1999. So I was, 12 or 13 at the time. And so I think that by adding the Muppets in, making it feel more like a party, making it feel more fun, making it chaotic in this great way, I think it's going to be more approachable for that, like, the realm of 8 to 12-year-olds who are like, maybe Big Thunder's like the biggest coaster that they've done so far. And they're like, okay, I'm going to do a coaster with a loop. And this is, Rock and Roller Coaster has for many years been like, okay, that is your gateway coaster. I think this is just secures it to be that gateway coaster even more for the future. And by having the Electric Mayhem be the starring act and having these guest stars, they can update it more easily in the future and have different, they can add in new songs much more easily than if they were working with a third party band. So I just think that this just sets it up so well for the future and carries on the legacy of what everybody loves about Rock and Roller Coaster, but just makes it so much more.
Yeah, from the time they announced it, said this gives the attraction a much longer shelf life because of its reprogrammability. Now you have the Muppets as this catalyst for any rock band or any soundtrack they want to put in there. They could do a holiday version. They could do, they could take it any direction they want. And they chose songs that are a little more timeless, much like, the Aerosmith soundtracks. Some of them are similarly timeless now. They're classic rock. And so, but even then, like if one of the songs for some reason just people lose interest in it, or it's no longer as relevant to people, or no longer, I don't think it'll no longer be as fun, but they could always swap it with something else. So it's great that they now have this, and they own the Muppets, right? So like they could theoretically just bring Dr. Teeth and the Electric Mayhem back to record something new. And so it's nice that they have that ability. And I think the last thing I actually, it will come up in one of the Imagineering interviews you hear later in this episode, but the number 100 came up a lot. There's over 100 Muppets featured in the attraction. There were 100 songs considered for the attraction. And I got to interview the creative director, Justin DeTolla, and he said that he wrote it 100 times during the refurbishment to get the soundtracks and the experience just right. So that's commitment. That's what some of the Imagineers got to do, right? Got to write something 100 times to get it just right. Anyway, so there's so much to talk about with Rock and Roller Coaster, but I think this gives listeners a good sample of what to expect and how the update was thoughtfully delivered. And again, you'll hear, if you listen later in this episode to some of the interviews, I had the chance to record with 3 of the Imagineers who worked on Rock and Roller Coaster in different capacities. But let's transition over to Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run. I think this is a little bit of a shorter conversation because it was not a complete reskin of the attraction. It was more like, again, sort of the upgrade from Star Tours to Star Tours Continues, and more of a software upgrade than a hardware upgrade. So I think people walking through, like if you had no idea that this ride was updated, if you walk through the queue, like you're not going to know anything until you get to the pre-show. And then you're like, oh, wait a second. This is not the same thing as I rode before.
Right. And even the pre-show changes are very subtle. Yeah. It is essentially the same pre-show with Hondo. Chewie comes in, but they removed all of the references to the Resistance. And it actually makes the story work better. Where before it was like, oh, Chewie's lending you the Millennium Falcon so you can help out the Resistance. And now it's Chewie is parking the Millennium Falcon there, and Hondo's like, hey, I got a ship you can use. And it's very subtle, and I think most guests might not even notice that there's difference. But it's one of those things where it's like, oh, this feels like you're a smuggler. This feels like you're doing something you shouldn't be doing. Whereas it's like kind of like, why would Chewie give the Falcon to some randos? So it actually, I think, is one of those things where it's like, it's a very subtle little difference, but it makes the story work even more. But like you said, going through the queue, going through the pre-show, really all the way up until you're about to get into the cockpit, everything feels the same.
Yeah, it's certainly the case. And now this is really a program update, and it feels like something that was always destined for Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run. I feel like they designed it for this purpose to eventually get this sort of update, and it's obviously timed well with the opening of the Mandalorian and Grogu in theaters. And now you have revised positions or updated positions. So, I mean, obviously the pilots are the same. But engineers got an upgrade on the attraction.
Oh, yeah.
And so now I feel like everyone, I don't know, is your favorite position now engineer, or I feel like a lot more people might fight over that position now.
Yeah, I love engineer. I still think pilot is the best. I still think that is the one that's the most engaging. You have the most control over what's happening. This is one of those things where this update, in some ways, it's very subtle, but in a lot of ways, it's huge because they upgraded the engine from Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 5, and so the graphics are much better. And they made a lot of like gameplay tweaks where it's like much clearer of like, oh, you're supposed to fly under this thing or between these things as the pilot. And so at the very beginning, there's kind of like a branching path where you can choose to go to the left or the right, which they didn't really have in the previous version. And so now there's even though the pilot's pretty much the same, it just felt a little bit tighter and a little bit more like, okay, I have actual influence over what's happening. But the engineer is great because there are two big changes. One of the engineers, and it's random, it can change sides, gets to pick which of the three destinations you go to. So you always start on Tatooine, and then you can go to Cloud City, Coruscant, or the wreckage of the second Death Star above the forest moon of Endor. And so one of the engineers gets to pick that destination, which all of those three destinations are wildly different and add a lot of rewritability. And within those, there are different things that can happen. The other thing that the engineer has is a Grogu button, which is like the best button ever, because you press that button and a little like scene with Grogu plays on your screen where he just does something cute, or he's eating cookies, or he falls off his seat, or something happens. But one of the times when I was on Coruscant, I realized if you press that button, it starts playing the Cantina band music. Whereas if you don't press it, that music doesn't play. So I think that there are going to be secrets and going to be things that people uncover as they keep playing this. I went on this ride 10 or 11 times trying to be like, okay, I want to cover all the secrets and all of this and all of that. And, I had a pretty even spread between the three planets. And there are still things that I'm like, oh, I don't think I uncovered all the secrets, or I don't think I uncovered that. And like, that's a really unusual thing to do, of go on a ride 11 times and be like, okay, I'm ready to go on it more and try to uncover more of these things. So the Grogu button is definitely like, pay attention to it and worth pressing, because it does seem like it can unlock things.
Yeah, speaking of unlocking things, I didn't do a deep dive on this and probably should have before this, but I saw after the fact when I was reviewing other creators' content and trying to figure out like what everybody else got. There's a Grogu mode, much like in the previous version, there was a Chewbacca mode. So did you unlock that, or do you know any more about it than I do?
I unlocked the Grogu mode. So the big difference, it's very similar to Chewbacca mode, where Chewbacca mode was like, instead of hearing Hondo throughout the ride, you just hear Chewbacca, and it's just kind of like this chaos mode. But before, you had to have every single person, all 6 people, do like a sequence of buttons to activate it. Now you only need 2 people to do Grogu mode, I guess, because it's so easy a baby could do it. And it's the 2 gunners, and it's like you have to press there's like a row of 4 buttons right below your screen. You have to press the backmost button, like towards the back of the cabin, hold that down, and then hold down the big like orange button. And once they both do that, every button will light up green, and then you have Grogu mode. And it's just like Grogu coos the whole time, and different Grogu things play on every single screen. And I would not recommend it for your first time on the ride, because it is a lot going on, and you just don't get any of the instructions or any of the context of like, okay, engineer, do this. Okay, gunner, do that. So that is a definite thing to do. Like, once you have a group that everybody's already done it, and everybody wants Grogu mode.
Yeah, that makes sense to wait for something like that. Now I'm kind of tossed on whether or not I think this is going to stay as the Mandalorian and Grogu for a long time. Like, definitely, I think for a good solid year plus, maybe year and a half. Like, I could see this staying this way. But I'm wondering if they have made so many updates to Star Tours The Adventure Continues, and they have these promo versions that seem to align with Star Wars movies that come out. And I'm wondering if maybe by the time we get to the next Star Wars movie, this might change again to something else. Do you get that impression as well? Like, I don't get the impression this is going to stay this version for like 4 or 5 years. That's just, again, me sort of like putting on my prediction cap here and thinking about what might come next.
Yeah, my impression more so is that this is the version of the ride going forward. But it also kind of sets the template. Whereas the original version of the ride that opened in 2019, it was very clear, like, okay, they want to have multiple missions. They want to have multiple destinations. And I think even Wall Street Journal reported that they had like 5 planned and that they ended up with 1. And so that was always part of the original intent of this ride. I think things are unlocked a lot more now that Disney has a deeper partnership with Epic Games, who makes Unreal Engine. And they know a thing or two about releasing many, many updates. Because, you know, now having this run on Unreal Engine 5, I believe they've upgraded all the computing hardware. And one of the things that was incredible about this was that they were able to basically reimagine this ride without closing it for a single day.
Yeah.
And we were able to preview it while it was still open to regular guests who were getting the Corellia version. And they just had one of the simulators set to this new mission that we were able to ride, which was just like one of those things where it's like, okay, they engineered this in a way that it can be updated. And I hope that they will. I hope they keep adding different missions, and maybe it's kind of like, hey, you don't know if you're going to get the Mandalorian coming up and saying like, hey, help me out on this mission. And then maybe like Ryan Gosling's character from Starfighter comes on in a few years and he's like, hey, help me with this mission. And, you know, it sends you to different planets. You know, you might go to Hoth or whatever it is. So I think that kind of sets the template for this ride to be updated for the future. But if this is what we get for the next 5+ years, I think there's enough variety in here that people are going to enjoy it. But I'm always hopeful that Disney's able to update it and keep adding more, similar to what they did with Star Tours. And I think that was made possible with the fact that, like, once Disney acquired Lucasfilm and ILM, that made it much easier for them to add those sequences. And now that Disney has such a deep partnership with Epic Games and that $1.5 billion investment, I'm hopeful that this means, like, and they're using Unreal Engine everywhere. So I'm really hopeful that it's like, hey, their pipeline to be able to add an extra planet to this or add an extra mission is not so big that, you know, it wouldn't be a huge surprise that once they do Starfighter or, you know, episode 10 one day, that they could add in some new planets, because I think that would just really make this attraction have such a great lifespan.
Yeah, and I agree that this is certainly a step up from the original version with all the variations that are now possible, and the rewritability factor on this has definitely gone up. So I think that it will probably, at least, I don't see it necessarily going back, except maybe they do have the ability to like split it in half, because there's 2 different sets of 2 carousels on the simulator. Yeah. So they could theoretically split it, and you can pick like Mission Space Orange or Mission Space Green. But right. It's I think that at least in some form it's either going to be this or something next. Like it's going to be something even bigger.
Yeah, I don't think they go back, because Corellia is like the only time I believe that appears in any of the films is Solo, which is not something that people are like, you know, begging
not
to
the
go
best
to
Star Wars
Corellia.
movie. Yeah,
not the best Star Wars. You know, I like to find, but not the best Star Wars movie. And you know, looking at this version of it, they brought in a lot of the classic John Williams music that was missing from the original version. You go to Tatooine, you go to all these other planets that are from the first 6 movies. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that they were trying to be like, okay, let's give people more of a classic Star Wars experience. And so and the fact that everything is up-resed, everything is running on a new engine, I think the work that they would have to do to up-res, you know, everything was running on Unreal Engine 4 before. I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze, and I don't think that they want to necessarily go back to something that doesn't deliver that classic Star Wars experience as much as this does.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So 2 great attraction upgrades at Hollywood Studios, and I didn't prep you for this, but I also didn't we just heard, as we're recording this today, like news today about Carousel of Progress and the updates that happening to that. So I feel like, especially as two Imagineering geeks, this is it'd be a missed opportunity not to talk about it a little bit. And I know this could probably be its own episode, but for the I'll just pose the question, what are your initial thoughts about the updates that we learned about today?
I'm really surprised at my reaction to it. Because Carousel of Progress is one of those near and dear attractions to my heart, similar to Muppet Vision, where it's just like I have so many great nostalgic memories about it. And it reminds me of my childhood. It has such this great history and lineage that draws back to Walt. And it's my wife's favorite attraction. My wife did not grow up as a Disney person. She went to Disney World once when she was a kid, and that was her, like, the one thing she was like, oh yeah, do they still have that thing where like you go back in time and see all the different decades? And I was like, oh yeah, Carousel of Progress. And so she loves Carousel of Progress. And when they announced it, and once we like saw what they're doing, that they're not just adding the Walt animatronic, but they're actually basically doing a complete overhaul and setting it in all these new decades, everything kind of clicked for me. I was like, oh, this is a really smart update. Because the original version of it, set when it was in 1964, it would have related to audiences so much of just like, hey, it might not have been what you lived through, but it's what your parents lived through or your grandparents lived through. And you heard those stories of like, oh, this is what it was like with the icebox. This is what it was like when we would blow a fuse, remembering having like the wiring hanging down for the electric lighting. And all of those jokes would have hit. Whereas today, people have nostalgia for the ride and not those eras. And all of those jokes hit because people went on the ride. And so it's kind of become this like meta thing where it's a ride about itself rather than a ride about progress itself. And so I think having these updates and setting it in these eras that, now I've lived through too many of the decades that they're talking about. I'm feeling very old. Yeah. But it is this thing of like, they're going to be able to talk about, the inventions that we grew up with, whether it's like,
VHS tapes and
a VHS tape,
dial-up internet
TV, or the internet and all those things. And then also just like setting the final scene in a John Hench inspired far-flung future that's off planet is just this thing that's like, okay, this is, it feels like it belongs in Tomorrowland again. It makes sense in Tomorrowland of like, and it feels like this thing of like, oh, you're going to get the original intent that Walt had of like, look how far we've come. Look at these things that you can remember growing up with or hearing about, of like these things that we thought were these amazing innovations and were at the time, but now are funny to look back at and think about. And I think that it's just going to give this show a whole new life.
Yeah, I'm very excited for it. I was saying in the quick little podcast episode I produced this week about it that if you're listening to this episode, it was a few days ago, but for our purposes, it was today. It was, just reflecting on how smart, to your point, this update is. I said the only operational challenge is it's now going to have weights. And so I'm predicting like where the queue's going to go, because there's now, I think, going to be a queue for this, because right now you could just literally walk into the attraction and get on the next show. I do not foresee that being the case, especially day one or week one. But it's so smart to carry us from, because I had predicted when they announced the Walt animatronic that it was going to be Walt introducing Carousel of Progress. It just makes sense to have him there. And now it literally carries us from 1964 World's Fair Walt to 1969, and then taking us forward from there. And to your point about like the generations, and my parents were around in the 60s, and so going to see that with them and myself and my daughters will be able to each relate to something that they weren't around in the 2000s, but like we can reiterate to them like, oh yes, like my parents say like they remember when there was the moon landing, or I remember the very vaguely the 80s, but like more so I remember the 90s, and so all the technology that was around it, I remember Y2K, I remember that New Year's Eve 1999 very well, and all the technology that was there and the sounds and all the things are just going to resonate a little more. I definitely foresee a lot of the same dialogue just being updated. Instead of traveling from New York to California in only 3 days, you can travel from New York to California in only 5-6 hours. Like it's
right.
A lot of the same jokes and references. Someone commented on my post today, man thinks he's going to land, or, Neil Armstrong thinks he's going to land on the moon. It'll never work. Like something like that. Like a lot of the same little digs from the first original. And honestly, I've said to people too, like, the version that you are now familiar with that maybe is nostalgic for you is not Walt's Carousel of Progress. It's like, people forget that. Like, yes, it's similar, but it's not the 1964-65 World's Fair Carousel of Progress. It's the 1994 Carousel of Progress update.
Right. This update will be like the 5th major revision. I think there's been like smaller revisions within there. It's kind of hard to like nail down exactly, but it is like they changed it moving from the 64 World's Fair to 67 at Disneyland. And then once they moved it again to Disney World, it changed. And they even had a long stretch where they didn't have A Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow, which, that is, they've confirmed that song is returning. They're not getting rid of the song. But imagine if they were doing that, of like, today, that was like, oh, we're getting rid of that song, the internet would have melted down.
Yes,
so, I mean, they kind of are already, but like, so this show has changed a lot, and it has changed a lot over the years. And I do think, like, I think about my son right now, he's 5, and he does ask about like, what were things like in the 80s? And he does call it the olden times, which is very mean. But it is just like this thing of like, I do think there is going, because it is you have a closer touch point, whether you lived through it or whether you're a generation or two away. It's, people in your life that are like, oh, I remember when I had the phone with a giant cord, or I had like the cell phone that was as big as my head, or whatever, Tamagotchi, or, and I think that, I feel like this is an attraction that is very revered within Imagineering, and that they understand how important this is. And based off of recent track record with things like Beacon Barrel, with things like Test Track, with all of the new updates and upgrades that have happened this summer, I feel like it's in very good hands. And so I'm very optimistic about, okay, this is a big change. This is a big swing. Like, I think the safe move would have been like, hey, we're updating the last scene. We're keeping everything else the same. We're updating the last scene, because that's kind of like what the predictable move would have been. And we're updating it to be in the far future, which I think could have been a fun update. But I think this is actually going to give the show a new life in such a smart way, and I'm really excited to see what they announce further for it, and what they show further for it, and then being able to watch it next year when it's supposed to open.
Yeah, I think we'll have to come back and talk more about it when they have more information. I'm expecting we'll probably get more at D23 or even after that. Yeah. So, I'm sure there'll be even more to talk about. But I agree completely with the assessment of what this attraction is going to be and how it's going to be a big swing. But I think it's also going to be a big hit for what the park needed and what this attraction needed. So I'm optimistic about all that. So, James, this is the second time I've had you on the show, but I want to make sure people know where to go, where to connect with you, because you put on such great content. I love watching your content as well. So where can people go to find all your videos and all the content you have?
So I am on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, at guide2 WDW, except on Instagram, I'm guide2 Disney. And, I call it Disney Intelligence for Smarter Vacations. It's both the strategies to be able to, go into the parks with and have a great time, and also the stories behind the magic that, will help deepen your understanding of what goes on into all of these attractions and makes them work.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll make sure everyone knows where to go. I'll put that on the link description of this episode, or the links in the description of this episode. But James, so great having you on the show. And for everyone listening, stay tuned, because we've got some Imagineering interviews coming up next.
Matt, thanks so much for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
Same here, man.
All right. Well, Betty, it's so nice to meet you. I would love to start by you talking about your title and your role on the Rock and Roller Coaster starring the Muppets.
Of course. So I was the producer of this attraction. So I was really after me to bring the story to life. I have creative directors from both the Muppet Studio side and the WDI side that come together and create a story that I then work with all of our different subject matter experts to bring to life in the attraction, and also helping push for the right story. It is a producer's job to allow others to do their job. And if there's something blocking them from doing that, I get in there, find out what it is, remove it so we can keep moving forward.
I love that. And we should start with story because everything with Imagineering starts with story,
absolutely.
Right?
You've been paying attention.
So Rock and Roller Coaster has been here for a couple of decades now. And for the most part, especially walking through here, I think most guests will realize that the structure, the blueprint, the bones of this attraction remain exactly the same. How did you incorporate the Muppets into this classic Disney's Hollywood Studios attraction?
You saying the word bones is exactly that, right? We had existing conditions that we had to work with. We had to make them, they had to make them work. So, but we had a lot of opportunities of a lot of unused spaces in here. So like the gallery case, were you able to go through the queue?
I did go through the queue, yeah.
The gallery case, just using extra, just taking up the space, adding color, adding light. A lot of wall space, a lot of those graphics of albums and historical Muppet references and stuff. But also in the pre-show, we really want to utilize that space by cutting it off. I don't know if you realize, but the last show was very far back. We brought a whole new wall forward so we could bring the action much closer to the guest, make the Muppets and the characters much more present. So much more lively, much more funny and humorous. But also, once you get into the alleyway, also just packed it full of props and decor that you'll probably recognize from Muppet Vision, and just things surprise and delight for everybody.
Yeah, it feels in many ways like elements of Muppet Vision 3D made their way here, and a lot of the characters made their way here as well. I noticed the penguins in the pre-show. There were so many little nods and Easter eggs even above us here. There's the Chuck reference to Chuck in Muppet Vision 3D. So in what ways did you think about since Muppet Vision 3D is now going to have a new attraction over there, how did you think about the Easter eggs from Muppet Vision 3D and their placement here at Rock and Roller Coaster?
Muppet Vision is such a beloved attraction. We really had a great opportunity to really pay homage to it, just like cherish and honor its legacy over here with all those characters. Like you said, we have over 100 different Muppet characters in our entire show. They're in the background, they're in the foreground. We got some characters out that you haven't seen in a long time. So being able to just like bring that, that joy that was from over there and just kind of implement it into here, but using it as a tool to tell our new story it was a fun challenge to do. It's finding the right balance, right?
Yeah, it is definitely finding the right balance. I didn't realize there were over 100 characters from the Muppets in here.
If you stand over in the rotunda, that first scene and stand by, those monitors there, they're playing media all day. That's where you're going to see most of your characters there.
That's great. Yeah. Now, another critical component of Rock and Roller Coaster is music, because it is Rock and Roller Coaster.
Sure is.
So how did the team go about deciding on the final set list from the Electric Mayhem?
Final set list. We tried over 100 different songs. It really was you come in the room, everyone has ideas what would work with this ride. It's all about the energy of the song. So we also wanted to consider a lot of different artists, a lot of different genres and eras of rock and roll, but also how it would work with the Electric Mayhem and on the high energy of the ride. So it really was just looking at each song, evaluating, seeing how it works on the ride it's really kind of about vibes too. We looked at it virtually to see how it looks when we're riding through it. Got to get on the train too, because that's a whole different aspect, but you actually get it on the train to hear in your ears the whole time. So that was a very, very fun aspect, going through songs, finding out which ones would be best for the story and best for just bringing new life to it.
Yeah, and it feels that way for sure. Now, Rock and Roller Coaster, as I said, it had its original version, now it's a Muppets version. What sort of Easter eggs can guests expect from the original attraction?
From the original, from the legacy attraction. You know what? We all want to honor this one as well. So over in the pre-show, you may recognize a couple of lines of dialogue in there that pays a little attention to what it was before.
That's great. And my last question for you is, now that it's fully here and guests are going to start experiencing it soon, what are you most excited for guests to see when they ride this new attraction?
Oh, what I'm excited to see, other than everything. No, and I mean, really, I think we did a really great job of this IP and the brand putting in this attraction. I'm really excited to see people enjoy it, appreciate that we have the Muppets back at Hollywood Studios, that they have a new home. So I think that's great to see.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you for spending the time.
Oh, of course,
and
of course.
I hope everybody gets a chance to check it out.
Oh, no, me too. Thank you so much.
So we're here at Rock and Roller Coaster starring the Muppets, and it's great to meet you, Vanessa. I'd love if you could start with your role on this project.
Yes, so I'm the project manager for the project. So making sure that everything was delivered as intended and on schedule. So that's my role.
I can say that it definitely delivered. It's an incredible attraction, incredible experience. Can you talk a little bit about how you integrated the Muppets into the legacy Rock and Roller Coaster attraction?
Yeah. So obviously the Muppets energy, I think, really fits here really well with the high-speed thrill of the attraction. They're a really silly, funny group. They also have the iconic Electric Mayhem band. So they kind of slide right into D-Force Records really well, story-wise. But in terms of how we brought them in here, the Electric Mayhem's obviously the star of the concert. Scooter being the icon of the pre-show. A lot of the elements that we have in here are also, some are nods to Muppet Vision. Some are nods to just the long history of media that surrounds the Muppets. And then, of course, there's some nods to what used to be here before. So if there's a lot of Easter eggs if you poke around.
I've noticed so many of them.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned the fact that Scooter is even in the pre-show, he was also in the pre-show at Muppet Vision, so the placement feels very appropriate for that.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of project management, this is an attraction that, when you think about the turnaround time from when Rock and Roller Coaster starring Aerosmith closed to when this attraction, I know we're in previews, but it essentially looks completely show ready.
Yes.
How did you deliver the new updated experience with all of these updates to the attraction in such a short period of time?
Yes. Yeah. A lot goes into it. So obviously there's a lot of things that happen before our downtime even starts. So there's a lot of planning that takes place with getting the figure tested and ready ahead of time, so that by the time we install it, there should be like minimal risk. Same thing with just the development of all of our show set, our graphics, show lighting, all of our elements. So we've placed a lot of focus on planning those things in advance so that our actual delivery in field could be just come in, put things in place so we can get this open to guests as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
So a lot of development in the pre-downtime phases to be able to pull that off.
That makes sense. What was the most complicated part of this project?
Yeah, I think with any attraction that's a ride, the logistics of doing things with an active ride and all the safety that goes into that as well is a big thing. There's a lot of planning that takes place shift-wise to make that happen and get work done around a live roller coaster. So I'd say that was the hardest part.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Yeah. My last question for you, there are 5 soundtracks on this attraction. Yeah. Which one is your favorite?
My favorite is Love Roller Coaster.
That seems like a very popular one. I was going to say Song 2 just because of the woohoos of the attraction, but Love Roller Coaster is a great answer.
Yeah.
Well, great job, Vanessa. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful chatting with you.
It's great to meet you.
So we're here once again at Rock and Roller Coaster starring Aerosmith, and I'm here with Justin. Yes. It's so great to get to chat with you.
Likewise.
Could you start by just talking a little bit about your role on this project?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the creative director. I did partner with another creative director from the Muppet Studio, but together we worked with concept designers, story writers, audio, and basically got everyone swimming in the same direction.
Yeah. I would love to talk about the partnership with the Muppets. How did that collaboration help to bring this attraction to life?
Well, Imagineering wanted the Muppets to begin with. When we knew we were doing a retheme, Muppets immediately came to mind. So we contacted the Muppet Studio. They were enthusiastically excited about becoming part of it. And it was really just a great partnership throughout.
That's great. Can you talk a little bit about the process of bringing the Muppets, and I almost feel like there's a Venn diagram here. It's a little bit of Electric Mayhem, a little bit of Rock and Roller Coaster, a little bit of Muppet Vision 3D. So
yes.
in the intersection of that, it feels like this attraction. So how did those pieces of the Venn diagram come together?
Well, we wanted to pay homage to the Muppet Vision 3D attraction. That's an attraction that's near and dear to all of our hearts. So we wanted to make sure that part of that made it over here. And we accomplished that with some of the Easter eggs that you see and hear in the videos and also in the queue. In terms of the Muppets, as I said, that was a partnership that happened really early on. And Danny, who's my creative partner over there, did an amazing job at creating so many of the assets that you see throughout the attraction today. And then the Rock and Roller Coaster just felt like the logical place for the Muppets to move because of the music, because of the comedy and the lightheartedness of it.
Yeah, it feels like it should have been here all along. It just feels like it was meant to be.
That's what we hoped for. And the hope was that the attraction felt lived in by the Muppets and the storyline would be created.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite Easter egg? Because I feel like there's tons in the attraction that I've noticed.
I do. I have two, actually. One is the Blast Off mural. If you were in queue and you turn around, you could see it up on the scaffolding. That's from the original Muppet movie.
Oh, amazing.
So that was pretty cool. We were excited about getting that in. And then there's also a Muppet Vision 3D camera in the queue as well that I really enjoy.
That's great. I feel like I've spoken so much about the queue with the few other Imagineers I've spoken to. I haven't spoken a lot about or asked a lot about the ride itself because it's the same exact, quote unquote ride, system as Rock and Roller Coaster starring Aerosmith. But I have also noticed that there were some enhancements that were made throughout the ride itself. So can you speak a little bit about that?
So two things that really stand out in my mind when you ask that question. First of all, the audio. We, it's 30 years ago since this was last updated.
Yeah.
And we went in and were able to really push the audio to its limits where we have really clear broadcasts of the songs that we picked and selected. So I'm really happy with the way that turned out. And then the pre-show is also something I'm extremely proud about. The pre-show came together in a way that it always felt like it was there.
Yeah.
And so we were excited about that as well.
Yeah. Speaking of music, there are, 5 songs that you landed on, but like anything else, I'm sure there was a ton
We had over 100 songs in the running.
So how did you narrow down on the final 5?
Well, so what we did is a process of video rides, so virtual rides via video, and then also physical rides. We went on and just listened to the song and said, does this fit the mold for what we want to accomplish here? And so we would narrow down and ride, and then narrow down and ride again. And eventually we got there.
So how many times did you end up riding this attraction?
Well over 100. Well over 100.
I hear that number 100 keep coming up, but because I also heard there's over 100 Muppets characters, or about 100 Muppets characters throughout here.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
We went with some deep cuts too, like Uncle Deadly and Big Mean Carl. So yeah, hopefully you cut some of them.
Yeah. There are also some celebrity cameos in the queue. So how did that come about?
Well, the Muppets have always lived alongside of Hollywood celebrities, and so we felt like it was just a natural extension to bring in our ride as well. One of the celebrities I'm most excited about, it's a bit of a deep cut, is Ken Marino, who was in the original Aerosmith attraction, and we brought him over to the Muppets attraction here as a record executive that's moved up through the ranks, and so we were pretty excited about that.
That's a real touch, a callback to G-Force Records.
Yes.
I love that evolution from the old attraction to the new one. 2 final questions for you. One's a quick one. Which is your favorite soundtrack on the attraction?
Love Roller Coaster with Questlove and Jennifer Hudson.
That's like the #1 answer.
Really enjoy it. It's so much fun. So much fun to ride.
And the second one is, or the final question I should say, is when this attraction officially opens,
The 26th.
The 26th. What are you most excited for guests to see or experience when they get to?
I think it's really exciting that a whole new generation of fans are going to inherit the Muppets in a really fun and new way. So really just hopefully they enjoy the roller coaster, of course, because that's the heart of the attraction, and the music.
Yeah.
But really enjoy the Muppets being present throughout.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure everyone will love it as much as we all have been enjoying it here.
Yes, it's been great.
Thank you so much for your time, Justin.
Oh my goodness, likewise.
Yeah. All right. Well, Morgan, it's so nice to meet you. I'd love if we could start with your role on Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run.
Yeah, so I'm Morgan McDowell. So at Imagineering, I'm a senior software project manager. And then for this new bounty hunting mission at Falcon specifically, I got to oversee and kind of lead all of our Florida install activities here locally at Hollywood Studios.
That's wonderful. Can you talk a little bit about how you incorporated the story of Mandalorian and Grogu into the legacy Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run attraction?
Sure. So we still have Hondo Ohnaka here at Black Spire Outpost, and he's still running a very legitimate shipping business for us here. But here, I think weaving in, our Mandalorian and Grogu, Hondo's kind of found out about the New Republic kind of has these bounties that they would like to catch. So Hondo makes a deal. All he needs is a crew and a ship. And that's kind of where our guests come in, right? So they're our crew. Our ship's going to be the Millennium Falcon. But, Din Djarin and Grogu are going to tag along to help our crew succeed in their bounty hunting mission.
It feels a lot like when Star Tours became Star Tours, The Adventure Continues, with the expansion of that universe. Did you look at all to that attraction for inspiration for how to perhaps reprogram this one?
I would say technically very different.
Yes.
There were actually a lot of times where we were like, well, how did they do it? How did we pull this off? And it's like, well, it's a whole different ballgame over here. So then, so that was fun. But yes, we did occasionally look at that, right? But I do think kind of when you look back at the updates for Star Tours, right? I think it's taking guests to these iconic Star Wars locations and landscapes, right? And I think we did kind of pull inspiration from that, right? Now that guests get to go to Tatooine, the wreckage of the Death Star, Bespin, and Coruscant.
Yeah. Now, one of the pieces of feedback I know a lot of guests had for the Legacy attraction was that everybody wanted to be the pilot. It seemed like it was the most popular role in the experience. So now I know that it's a little different. Like there might be some more competition between whether you want to be an engineer or a gunner. So how did you think about the changes to the roles on the attraction?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to, honestly, it kind of starts with the tech updates for the attraction. We were able to upgrade to the Unreal Engine 5, running all new show game computers here at the attraction to support hardware that can do more, right? More efficiently and visually better as well. But starting there kind of gives us those creative unlocks that we see now in the game, in the video game, in the attraction itself. All three roles are enhanced, right? I think in their own way. Pilots have the ability to fly through these new locations, but also these new locations have branching directions that you can go, right? So if you fly left the first time, or maybe you see a tunnel up there, you should try flying to it, right? You can fly through all these different spaces in a new way. Our gunners, you still have the ability to go manual or automatic, but maybe what you're shooting and what you're doing is different depending on what bounty you pick. And then our engineers, of course, kind of have more of a spotlight now as they're in charge of which bounty we go after, which planet we end up flying to. And I like to say they're also the key component here for Hondo, smuggling those crates, tractor beaming in the crates for us. So Hondo can, make some money out of this deal.
I feel like there are so many different planets in the Star Wars universe. Yes. So how did you narrow the choices to the ones you selected?
Right. I think at Imagineering in general, right, when we look at a new project or we look at what we're doing, I think we always ask ourselves, like, what planet do I want to, right? As a fan, right? As a fan, as a guest, like, man, what do I want to do when I fly the Millennium Falcon? Where do I want to fly the Millennium Falcon through? I think me personally, right, I think Coruscant is pretty near and dear to my heart. It's very reminiscent of like, our classic like Obi-Wan and Anakin flying through a very crowded, right, traffic scene. So I think that's really fun, and being able to give their guests and give fans the ability to live out their Star Wars dreams.
That's incredible. A lot of that, I'm sure, came to life because of, at least in some way, a partnership with Lucasfilm.
Of course, yes.
So can you speak a little bit more about that partnership?
Yeah, we worked with Lucasfilm throughout this entire project. We're all Disney, so we're all one family. We love getting to work with our internal partners. But the goals of like, we're going to open this day and date with the movie, and we're going to, we're working with Lucasfilm on the new assets added to the game, maybe some Easter eggs from the movies, right? Just translating that, right, from Lucasfilm IP into our attraction IP and what that might be.
Do you think audience viewers who go to see the film are going to find any surprises or nods to the film and the attraction? I haven't either. I mean, it's coming out.
I can't. You're not the first person to ask me that. I'm like, I don't know. I haven't seen the movie. I've seen the attraction. I'll find out.
Yeah. Well, my last question for you is, what are you most excited about now that this attraction is here for guests to see or to experience?
I think I'm excited I think the core of this attraction, right, has always been the dream fulfillment, right, of flying the Millennium Falcon. I think I'm most excited for our guests now to fly the Millennium Falcon through super identifiable fan favorite locations. I think it's fun. It's lighthearted. It's whimsy.
Yeah, it seems like such a great transformation of this attraction. And thank you, Morgan, for your time today.
Thank you. We have a great day.
Welcome back to Imagination Central. Before you exit this episode, remember to follow Imagination Skyway on social media and share the show with anyone who might enjoy listening to our program. If you're looking for ad-free episodes and lots of bonus content, you can become an Imagination Skyway pass holder at patreon.com/Imagination Skyway. And when you're ready for your next Disney vacation, remember that listeners of Imagination Skyway can get rewarded for booking a trip to Disney in 2026 through KMV Travel, voted the top travel agency in Orlando in 2025. Simply fill out the form at kmvtravel.com/Skyway and make sure that you select Imagination Skyway under the How Did You Hear About Us question to be eligible for a special gift from the team. Terms and conditions apply. As you disembark, please remember to remain fully seated until the podcast comes to a complete stop, then gather your belongings and watch your head and step as you exit. Thank you for joining me aboard Imagination Skyway, and remember, if we can dream it, we can do it.